pass a new law, change sentencing or something like that, then Normal might get a call. But of all of the stories written about marijuana, those are by far the least frequent. What you would have is probably the more common would be sort of the nature of the problem type stories. Drug abuse stories, what drug dealers are like, things like this. And you'll almost, it's a peculiar situation where you have policemen describing what drug users are like. I mean, it's like the sole source of what Clinton is like would be conservative Republicans, so the sole source of what Newt Gingrich is like would be liberal Democrats. I mean, I find it quite acceptable that you would ask the police what they think drug users are like, but the first people you would ask would be drug users. And those are people you would never see quoted in the newspaper, almost never. And if you do see them quoted, they're often already behind bars, or more likely they're in some drug rehab center. So it's not sort of just the general random sampling that would give you an accurate perception of who drug dealers are, what they think about drugs, how it affects their life. But the most common story that you'll see in newspapers, and I can't ever remember seeing Normal or any marijuana reformer quoted in these stories, are people being arrested for marijuana, just your basic police blotter story, or people being sentenced. And it's very difficult, of course, for the defendant to make a case, because he's in a difficult predicament, as you can understand, or even his lawyer. But you would think if it was an objective story, then you would then quote some normal reformer who came to the court and say, I think this is an outrage that this man or woman is being sent to jail for smoking marijuana. As if you can imagine if a gay man was being sent to jail for sodomy, one, that activists would be there to give the quote, and it would be in the paper. But as things are now, there's no activist there, and there's no quote. So essentially, the essence of how drugs are used and sold in this country falls below the media radar. I think that Steve and Dick are quite right in sort of how the breakdown of establishment media power could end up benefiting you, because the media has never been a leader in these issues. We basically, on medical marijuana, we haven't been the leader. I think that 1994 press conference that Dick talked about, or one around then, I covered, and I wrote what I think was the first national story on cannabis buyers clubs. And I did what I thought was quite, not just on the one in San Francisco, but there were in Oklahoma City and Washington, D.C. There were about 18 of them. And I interviewed patients and described how the whole system went. And I got like 10 inches on the bottom of some inside page with a little photo. But a year later, when the San Francisco Buyers Club sort of forced it into the national mainstream, a lower quality story appeared on the big stories, big pictures on the front page of the Life section. So timing is everything, not just the reporting. And I think that the mainstream media is ahead of the legislators, but I don't know if you would disagree with that, but I think on medical marijuana, on hemp,
everybody does.
Right.
That's making pretty.
But I think if you're looking for the mainstream media to be open to your message, I think that we are quite open. But reporters by nature are not ideological. They're not philosophical. They're pragmatic, and they're practical. And they write a whole bunch of stories, and they quickly go to the sources that are the accepted sources and the accepted supply of the information. And the key is to get into the mainstream, which Dick and Normal at other times has been really almost in the forefront. You wouldn't do a story on marijuana perhaps in 1975 or whenever without contacting Normal. So I'm not really sure if I have any practical advice for you, as I would suggest to add, but I would think is be persistent with reporters. Call them up, be persistent and polite. A protest is far less likely to get news coverage than you would think. They happen all the time. We get every special interest group in the world who wants us to come out and cover their unique protest. And it lacks uniqueness. But I think that you would be much more effective if you're in a small town And when you see someone in the paper who's being sentenced for marijuana, you call up the reporter and say, I'm available. When these people are sentenced, or even more likely get some retired normal activist to sit around the courthouse and sit back there and offer quotes and sort of just bubble up that way. It might be more effective to get your point across.
And with that, we'll open it up to questions from the floor and also from other panel members. Dick, do you have something you want to?
Well, I would say that my old friend Dennis is too rare, and I think too kind to his fellow journalists. And this is, again, but the problem is quite often not, I mean, most often really is not at the reporter level, at the editorial level. And one of the experiences I had when I was at Normal, and I'm sure Alan has had many times also, is that having reporters ranging from a junior reporter at a major metropolitan daily to a very senior editor at a major national magazine call up after a story to run and say, that's not the way I wrote it. And then in the sense that, I mean, you know what the reporter's views are, you know what facts he had, and then you look forward to seeing the article come out, and lo and behold, it's party line. Or it isn't party line, it is so mumbled that you couldn't really tell what it was saying. And seeing the way the editorial thing handled, when a long article was written for Parade magazine a number of years ago, it came out as a very short article. And then they have a very biased, very loaded question for a poll on marijuana issues. And it was, yet even so the questions were loaded the way they did. This is an on-site poll, but the response came out was a substantial majority in favor of decrim and an overwhelming majority in favor of medical marijuana. And God, you had to look for that and back, I mean, Parade's not very big, but it was the very little thing at the bottom of the inside fold type thing. And so I've seen this, as a practical matter of how these things, that where the reporters, you get honest reporters, and I think most reporters are honest, and I think that one point that Dennis made is very important. Is always, do not be confrontational to reporters. Most reporters really want to do an honest job of reporting. They've been lied to just like all the rest of us, and so they have to get over a lot of brainwashing as well. But with a little help, they can be rehabilitated also.
Question from the floor?
Yes, my name is Robert Carradine. I've dealt with the press in my own town, and one of the things that
with news content, it was entirely advertising deals. They gave additional advertising, which is the way it's designed. And in the New York Times case, the business side printed out brochures to go into the schools, which to me that's acceptable. It's within the firewall. If it turns out that we were getting credits for articles that reporters wrote that were considered favorable to the drug war, I mean, I really would consider that to be a scandal. But I've talked to other journalists, and no one seems to think that it has happened at our newspaper or any newspaper like it happened with the television scripts. Although I reserve the right to report back to you differently at a later date.
Let me add something there from marijuananews.com. On October 19, 1998, there was a press release from the Magazine Publishers Association that was headlined that the Magazine Publishers of America accepts anti-drug ad challenge. And as a part of this deal, it said that they will also be involved providing editorial support appropriate for their audiences. My headline on that was the media switches from promiscuity to prostitution. I think that in point of fact, though, that all they really are doing is they're getting paid for what they were giving away in the first place, which ain't no bad deal, I suppose. But I don't think that there is a lot of this influence of fail in the print media, simply because there doesn't have to be. I mean, they have a, at this point, 60 some odd year, 70 some odd year proven track record, and